All right, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Clayton Smith. I'm a graduate student at State right now in landscape architecture. I'm here for the summer. So, yeah.
My name is Libby Indermaur. I'm an undergraduate student in the horticulture department. And yeah.
My name is Shelby Ferrell. I'm a sophomore and a half in CALS. I am an ag science major with hort and crop science minors.
My name is DeRose. I'm a student in the undergraduate program for horticulture at NC State, concentrating in landscape design, and also here for the summer. Let's get started.
That's us.
Yeah. It's tour time. Take us to the first spot.
All right, so I'll start us off over here. Yes. All right, so to get us started, the first tree I chose is this Albizia julibrescens, the summer chocolate cultivar. Some of you probably know it better as the mimosa tree. You probably see it everywhere along roadside. You probably see it in fields and generally anywhere there's a wild buffer. Just some quick facts about it. It is native to Asia. It was originally grown as an ornamental tree, but it has gotten out and naturalized itself. And its bloom time is from June to July, and I'm actually happy because it has a few blooms left, but you see it has these very silky light pink blooms on this really dark foliage. The one you're used to seeing is probably the one with the green foliage and just the pink flowers. And these are very fragrant, and they attract bees and hummingbirds, so I think it's pretty useful for a pollinator garden. And after these flowers die off, they do turn into brown pods, which I've heard from some people can get a little messy. So I don't think it's used very often in like urban spaces or even as a street tree. Some good things about it. It is very fast growing, so it will take up a lot of space very quickly. And like I said, it is usually planted as ornamental, this summer chocolate variety. And it's really appropriate for this area because it can really tolerate very high temperatures and a lot of drought. In fact, it flowers the best when it is in full sun, but it can tolerate a little bit of part shade. It has no fall color, so when the frost hits it, it will die back and all you're left with is the trunk. And yeah, like I said, it's used mainly as an accent understory tree. I've seen a few designs where this is used in buffers against parking lots and then a main road. And yeah, it's mainly used for its dark foliage. And then later in the walk, I'll show you a weeping variety. So yeah, this is Albizia julibrescens.
It's a 10-year size. Can it be pruned back some?
It can be pruned back. A lot of people don't prune it. They want it to get that base shape to it. Yeah.
I'm growing mine as cut back so they never flower and go to seed.
They do self-seed. They seed a lot, so you will have a lot of seedlings. And I think it only gets around 20 to 40 feet high altogether, so at maturity. But you can kind of see it is a very beautiful understory tree, and it stands out. So yeah. We all good? All right, on to the next tree.
So this here behind me is the Dahlia imperialis. I think of the 42 or so species of dahlia, if I'm not mistaken, this is the tallest one, and certainly the tallest one that we have here. And here I have a picture to pass around because it's not in flower right now, but feel free to just read down the line. And it's native to Mexico and Guatemala, but you can see compared to the other dahlias that we have here that have already gone through their first really main flush of flowering, this one won't flower or show signs of flowering until November. And in Mexico and Guatemala during November, you can probably imagine that temperatures are a lot more mild than they would be here. So the flowering here is pretty unreliable. If we get a hard frost in late fall, then it won't flower. So I've actually never seen it flower. I'm really hopeful that this is a mild November. But that's, I think what I like most about it is its height. I didn't know that these existed until I came here. I thought all dahlias were around that size. And then you can see at the base, really the cane that's quite substantial, looks sort of like bamboo, I think, in its size, is actually used by the Aztecs as a way of transporting water or as a source of clean drinking water. If they came across it maybe in the woods, and I can't remember the Aztec name for it now, but it translates in English to water cane. So if you're ever thirsty, maybe. But yeah, so on to the next plant.
All right, so before I get started, here is another variety of albizia like we just saw. This is the more common green one that you are probably used to seeing, and it's a weeping variety, so that's there for your eyes. So the second tree I want to talk about is this one right here. The common name for it is a katsura tree, and it is Cercidophyllum japonicum. It is native to Asia, and it is very hardy here, and it gets about 40 to 60 feet high at maturity. And it does have year-round seasonal interest. You have small blooms in the spring, and then you have these bluish-green leaves in the summer, and then it goes from yellow, orange to red in the fall. So pretty good seasonal interest. The reason I like this tree is I've seen it used very successfully as a street tree. It doesn't mind the pollution. It doesn't mind the intense conditions of, like, say, a parking lot or anything like that. And as an example, I don't know how many people are familiar with Centennial Campus, but they utilize a lot of these, and it's one of the only ones that are doing well. A lot of their sycamores and other trees are starting to die back because they don't like the street conditions, but these are doing really well there. A cool fact about it, and one of the reasons I chose it, is when it drops its foliage, some people says it smells like cotton candy or burnt sugar. I've been able to smell it a few days, but my colleagues can't seem to smell it. But yeah, these fallen leaves right here. So it is in the fragrant category. And yeah, like I said, I've used it several times in my street designs, and it holds up pretty well. Later on in the tour, Libby's going to show you a weeping variety that has a similar structure. So yeah.
Tell me more about the flowers.
The flowers. So when it has small blooms March to April, and like a greenish red color.
Greenish red.
Greenish red.
Okay.
Reddish green, either one. So yeah.
Are they showy?
They're not really showy. I would say they look somewhat like this, like, you know, just kind of reddish green, something like that. It's not grown for its blooms at all. It's more grown for its fall color, and yeah.
Do deer like it?
It says, so they are deer resistant, but people say when they're seedlings, the deer do like to munch on them. So, like with anything, yes. Any other questions?
Well, Viv pointed out that it was smelling right now, and as soon
You
as
can
she
smell
said
it?
I could smell
I'm
it.
not crazy, and no one says they can smell it, but
Who here
so-
smelled it?
So what does it smell like to you? Burnt
That's a good
sugar and
number.
apple? Cotton candy? I say cotton candy, but some people say it smells like apples or burnt sugar. But
Just the leaves on the ground?
Okay.
Mhm.
Typically, you get the fragrance really strong when there's a frost. If you come out after a frost in the fall, it is extremely fragrant.
so yeah, that's the katsura tree. All right, everyone. So for our fourth tree, we have the Cedrus atlantica, the Atlas cedar, and this is the Argentea fastigiata cultivar. For those of you who know, Atlas cedars get really large. A lot of people use them as park trees, but this is a smaller, more columnar version. So it's really good for smaller urban spaces, you know, small yards, things like that. So it's pretty desirable. At maturity, it gets around 30 to 40 feet tall and only 5 feet wide, so it stays true to its name. So at maturity, it only gets 30 to 40 feet tall and about 5 feet wide. So it holds true to that columnar nature. And if it's happy, it can live 80 plus years, so it stays around. So an interesting fact about it, the city of Cary just authorized this tree to be used. They have a strict landscape manual, and they just certify that this tree can be used now. So it's going to start showing up in the medians and other pretty places in Cary. I really like to use it to complement architecture. It really does form a column with that silvery blue foliage, and it's an evergreen, so it's year-round interest. And like I said, it is used both as a specimen tree and to blend in with a variety of other taller trees. I've also seen it used as a hedge. I don't know how I felt about it, but I've seen it used that way.
Wow.
It was very pretty. It is a slower growing one. Unlike the Atlas cedar, grows pretty fast, but this is a slower growing one, so it doesn't take up too much space too quickly. And I think that's about all I have for this one. A lot of formal landscapes like to use it, like museums, art museums, things like that.
How old is that one?
How old is this one? I'm not actually sure how old this one in particular is. Do you know, Mark?
We received it in 2000.
2000.
Probably came as quarter one
About
gallon.
18 years. Like I said, it will get up to 30 to 40 feet tall, so it's doing well. It's happy. All right.
If it gets 5 feet wide in close, in landscapes it'll get quite a bit wider. If anybody here works for the city of Cary, keep that in mind.
Okay, so for my first plant that I'm going to discuss with you guys today, I'm going to talk about the Albizia coriniana, the Korean mimosa. So we've been talking a lot about mimosas today, and this one I chose to talk about it today because I think it's kind of a special specimen. So it's native to the Udall Mountain in South Korea, and it was found by a man named Takenoshi Nakaya, and I really like it because if you look up at the from below the tree, it's got beautiful branch architecture, and I think the leaves just hit the sky like very nicely. And it's a nice large specimen tree for a large landscape, and I just think it does well to contrast against what we normally have around here in North Carolina. Like, I mean, you can just look how it's just a completely different structure than the magnolia tree. It's a deciduous woody perennial, and this is about the height it gets at maturity. This is about its full size, and so I have actually a picture of the tree in bloom to pass around because I think that's one of its coolest features. The flowers look just like the mimosa blooms that we saw, the pink ones, earlier in the tour, except for they're just all white, and I just like the kind of like cloud gentle appeal it has in the landscape. So yes, it is. Yep. Any other questions?
This plant is, we get probably more requests for seed from it from European gardeners and botanic gardens than anything else in the Arboretum. Usually most every year I'll get several requests for seed from it from people who see it on our online list.
Is it a popular landscape tree out there or something, or trying to be?
I think it's an unusual tree. You don't see it in the trade. The other trees, the other plants that have been talked about, you can find in the trade. You're not going to buy this anywhere. So if you really want it, you have to convince the interns to collect seeds so we can sow it and grow it out.
Do some weeding.
Mark,
Yeah.
I remember from an earlier tour that someone gave, and I don't remember who, that it's becoming extinct in its native area because it's hybridizing with the pink one. And it may be that the Europeans want our seeds because they're still white.
That could be, yeah. I don't know, but yeah, it can hybridize. And as Korea's growing, a lot of stuff's being cut down as well. They're losing a lot of habitats, and very restricted area it grows in.
All right, on to the next one. Ready? All right, so this is the Vitex Negundo variety heterophylla. This tree is in the Lamiaceae family, and I chose it today because it's honestly a great pollinator. When I first walked by this tree in the garden a couple of weeks ago, this this particular tree right here was just blooming, and it looked like it was coming alive with the amount of bees and butterflies and everything that was flying all around it. And if you look over, there's another vitex right next to it that, well, yesterday it had a good amount of bees on it, but you know, it all depends on the time of day and the temperature and stuff like that. But the common name for this tree is the cutleaf chase tree, or chast tree, and it's also been called the monk's pepper tree. And the reason for that is because monks back, you know, hundreds of years ago, they believed that eating this tree, or eating the leaves of this tree, would help them stay celibate, hence the word chaste. And so it's been a popular tree and a well-known tree for hundreds of years, and it does great. I think it would be a great addition to a pollinator garden, because you don't see a lot of trees in pollinator gardens, you know, the way you'd think of them typically. So I think this is a good, it doesn't get very large, and it's got a nice kind of compact habit, well, as far as trees go. And so I think it's just a great addition to any pollinator garden in the area. And the cutleaf comes from the way the leaves look. And I mean, they look like they've been cut, to me, like by a third grader doing his like cutting exercises. So yeah, that's the cutleaf chast tree. Any questions? Cool.
No questions.
Well, if you look on the ground below it, there's a lot of seedlings below it. But I mean, that's just, I don't think it's a very messy tree. It's more just, you know, just coming in and like weeding it basically. I'm not sure of that.
I don't think it's typically a bird food. It does set a lot of seed. It will put up a lot of seed, but it's like a lot of plants that people think they're really eating. It's quick succession there, so it's cultivating it all. It's growing other things. It doesn't really outcompete other things, so it can move into disturbed sites, but it won't displace functioning plants and functioning ecosystems. And it does have, as Adam mentioned, with the pollinators, it does have I think an overall positive environmental impact.
Yep.
Do you know where it's native to, Adam?
I think it's native like to the meridian.
Just on the label.
To East, Central, and North China and Mongolia. And there's a lot of vitex around here. We'll pass a lot of vitex on our walk today, if we haven't already. So.
Maybe some available from the Arboretum from Wild Collector from China in 2017.
That would be great point to have. I really think this would go well with any pollinator garden.
It's also a great plant if you have a coastal garden. You know, you have a house on the beach. It's fairly salt tolerant. It's very drought tolerant. It'll grow in almost pure sun, just blazing hot sun. It's a really tough plant.
Okay. So this is the next plant I chose for our plant walk today. It's a Chemicipora, Piscifera fallifera. It's the green thread Sara fall cypress. It's a kind of a mouthful for me. the reason I chose this tree today was mainly for like what you see going on around it. This is called, if you find this in the wild, it's called a fairy ring, or some people call it a fairy ring, and it's supposed to bring you good luck to walk through it. And the reason, well, as you can see, this is totally where you could find a fairy in the woods, in my opinion, you know, looking at this. And I also think in a home landscape, if you were able to achieve this, you could see like lights, you know, strung all around here. You could put up, you know, hammocks between the trees. I even think you could put like a table around the trunk and kind of have like this really nice gathering space that's like really aesthetic and, you know, brings you shade all day, and it's an evergreen tree, so it won't ever go away. And you know, you can even throw in ivy like we have here, and it looks even better in my opinion. This phenomena is caused by something called layering, which happens in the wild and is also it's also done by man. And what the process is they take low-growing limbs and they bring them down to the ground. And so, like, say we're talking about this one. You bring the limb down to the ground and cover it in soil. You could even like mix some of the underside of the branch to like to ensure adventitious roots grow there. And when that happens, it pretty much just forms another tree. And you can cut it off of the main trunk, and this is the effect you can get. Some kind of tidbits about the Latin in the name of this tree. So Cami means dwarf, and Cyperissos, cypress tree. So it's called the dwarf cypress tree in Latin. I'm not sure how that came about, since this is a very large tree. But the piscifera comes from the root word pisum, which means pea, and fairy, which means to bear. So it bears small cones as it does. And this conifer is native to China and Japan. That's what I have for you. It's just a beautifully structured tree, and the things you can do with it, in my opinion, are endless in a landscape.
Can you do this with almost any kind of zippers?
I believe so.
Well, a lot of them, the branch structure doesn't lend to this. They will, Chamaecyparis in terms of conifers is one of the easier ones to root. And that's, layering is just rooting a plant, but while it's still attached to the parent plant. So, yeah, I mean, if you have ones where you have branches that come down like that are a little more flexible, they will lend themselves to that a little bit more.
If you put some tiki torches in here,
There you go. Anybody been bit by mosquitoes?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm feeling it.
Right here? Oh,
Smells good too.
So earlier in the tour, Clayton talked about the Cercidiphyllum japonicum, and that one was the upright tree. This is the weeping variety, commonly called the weeping katsura. And just reiterating what Clayton said, it's native to China and Japan, and there, in the upright habit, it can grow 40 to, I think you said 60 feet. And so I think what's particularly notable about this tree is that while it remains weeping, it also can reach not quite 40 to 50 feet, but it gets taller than a standard weeping tree. I was hoping maybe here I would smell the Like,
little
I
bit.
can't.
Over here.
It's so frustrating. Maybe I have a dull nose. So it's part of the family Cercidifolaceae, and that is a monotypic family, which means that it only has one genus, the genus of this tree. And you might, the first time I saw it, I thought, oh, it must be related to Cercis canadensis or any of the Cercis trees because of the heart shape. And I thought when I saw the name that, oh, it must really be related. But it's not, but it was named for the, I think, according to Tim, okay, named for its, the relational appearance, I suppose, to the redbud. I thought, I looked at the back of the tag earlier, hoping that I could show you, but on the back of all of these is typically an accession number where the first 2 digits correspond to the year in which it was entered into the collections. This one actually doesn't have the number, but when I was looking it up in our collections, the number begins with XX, and that actually indicates that it was here during J.C. Ralston's time and before the Arboretum actually was doing a consistent accessioning. And so we're not sure when it entered the garden, which I think kind of, there's a mysteriousness to it, I suppose, which I really like. So right now we're standing in what on the map that you might find is designated as Loblolly Grove, under what looks like miniature versions of the almost painfully common loblollies. But these are actually a dwarf group of loblolly pines that I think have a excitingly unique story for NC State specifically. So in the 1960s, there was a researcher in the forestry department at NC State who found a witch's broom on a loblolly pine in Virginia on just one tree, and he harvested the cones and grew out the seedlings, and after a year he offered them to the horticulture department at NC State, and a professor there took cuttings and grew, if I'm not mistaken, these trees here, but then very few were grown after that for trade or to be planted in others' gardens. And what makes it difficult to propagate them is that they don't root well by cuttings, the mature wood at least. So what you find here, grafting is the best method, which makes it difficult to be in high supply in the nursery industry, which is ultimately what J.C. Ralston wanted, because these are a really unique form of loblolly. So in 2006, the Arboretum grew some seedlings out, and I'm not sure which nurseries received those donations, but some nurseries and some gardens did. And I looked online a few times to try to find if you could buy one of these, and I couldn't find anything. So I think for a lot of people, this may be the only place where you can come and stand under this dwarf type of loblolly. And there are 4 others, I think, in the garden, maybe more. And then there are 2 on NC State's campus, and more than that.
Kilgore's lined with them in front.
Oh, I thought it was just 2 in front of
No.
Okay, well, yeah, several in front of the horticulture building on campus, and that's all that I've seen. Any
Yucca
questions?
Nursery is the nursery that very occasionally has them for sale.
They are, so if you notice the name, it's not, most things like this, you would have like Pinus Tata, Ralston dwarf as a cultivar. These have our NCSU dwarf group because these are not clonal. So they're all different because they're all grown from cuttings from seedlings. So we have grown out seed 2006. We grew out seed, and you get a breakdown. You get some that are very obviously dwarf and some that are very obviously going to grow tall, and some in between. We got rid of all the tall ones. We got rid of most of the in-between ones, and the dwarf ones we distributed around. Problem is, people don't like to graft pine trees, and they definitely don't like to graft loblolly pines because that's a southeastern pine, and most people who are interested in dwarf pines traditionally are in colder areas where they can't grow broadleaf evergreens, so they grow more dwarf conifers for cold areas. So it hadn't been a big push to propagate them. Nobody's making big bucks on them.
And doing it from seed and doing that sort of
Well,
filtering process,
they don't
you
set a
said
lot
that-
of seed. That's part of the problem.
Okay. Because like that one there is really cool, I think.
Yeah, and what would be nice is, to actually get graft cuttings from some of the best forms. One of the ones in front of the lath house is really tight and round. That's got a more open, picturesque habit, but it's staying smaller. That would be the ideal, and put names on the specific clones. They were distributed a couple times with some clonal names, but nobody knows which particular plant those came from, so the clonal names are really no good anymore.
All right, everyone. So this looker is an Agave ovatifolia. It is the frosty blue cultivar, and it does really well in zone 7B to 10. So it does like it hotter, like most agaves. And it gets about 3 to 4 feet high and about 4 to 7 feet wide. So this one's doing pretty good. And like as you see, it does really like full sun. And it has a slow growth rate, but it only flowers one time and then it dies. But the flower, like, it's commonly known as a century plant, but it actually can put off a flower between 30 and 50 years, I believe. At least that's what I've read. I've seen them do much quicker. So one of the main reasons I picked a particular agave is that it is one of the more cold hardy ones. I don't know if you guys have been in the Xeric garden, but a lot of the agaves there don't appreciate our cold, and they have a lot of more severe dieback than this at the bottom. So this is a more cold hardy one. And like I said, at the end of its life cycle, it'll shoot up a 10 to 20 foot spire, and it'll bloom from that like most century plants, and then that's the end of its life cycle. This one does not put off the chicks or the pups, I've heard them called, both things, so you can't get another plant from this. And I've seen it, I've never really used agaves in a lot of designs, but recently I've been seeing it a lot in modern landscapes, formal landscapes. A lot of museums are starting to pick up on this. I know the NCMA, our art museum here, has a few of these going in pretty soon. And yeah, I've seen a few open plazas and urban spaces use these a lot too, because they do like that full sun. And they do take a while to bloom, so you don't have to worry about it dying instantly when you put it in. But yeah, so that is the Agave ovatifolia.
And the whole plant dies.
The whole plant dies. I've never seen one of these bloom. I don't know, Mark, if you've seen one.
Oh yeah. We actually, to give you a sense, a lot of the timing for when they bloom, when they say 30 to 50 years for something like this, that's because that's coming out of the Southwest. And one of the big misconceptions about agave is that they want desert-like conditions. They grow in desert-like conditions. They don't necessarily compete well because they grow slow as small plants. So where they don't have much competition, they're really set up to perform. What they actually want is perfect drainage. They don't want to sit in water. So, up on a mound like this with perfect drainage, when it gets lots of water like we get here, but it also gets lots of heat like we get here, and it's got perfect drainage, they grow much, much quicker and reach maturity much, much quicker. So last year we had one on the rooftop. Was it last year or the year before?
I think year before.
Year before, we had one on the rooftop. So the McSwain was dedicated in 2002. So, you get a sense of how old that was. It flowered a couple of years ago. So, in about 15 years, it flowered and died. And it was about this size. I would not be shocked to see this flower in the next year or two.
Can you do layering or other than if there are no pups, it's either seed or can you propagate it any other way?
So, this is a cultivar. It is a clonal one. It's frosty blue. There are ways to induce pups in these agaves that don't typically pup. Sometimes when they flower, they will send up a few pups, even ones that don't typically. But you can also go in and you can dig up a young plant. I mean, you can dig up an older plant, but it's harder. And you can cut through kind of the base of the plant into the roots, and you can get it to put out some pups. You can. I think Tony maybe drills down right through the center. You can also do them through tissue culture, which is a whole lot easier if you have that capability.
Tony's Friends lecture from a couple years ago was about propagating the woody lilies and working with them. And he did talk about the method Mark just demonstrated, and that video is available online. And we have a flower spike, a dead one, on the bookshelf in the visitor center if you want to see how big it is. And there's an agave in the parking lot with one of the little offsets flowering, so you can see the flowers right now.
But yeah, like I said, I mean, the settings I've seen it in is very typical to this. You know, they usually surround it with grasses or something just to complement it, because it usually is the specimen plant. But yeah, that's Frosty Blue.
So, this recently defoliated tree behind me is the Catalpa tashkentensis morning cloud, and this is an intergeneric hybrid between the Catalpa bignonioides and the Chalopsis desert willow. And the hybrid was bred by one of JCRA's own Richard Olson and Thomas Ranney. Richard Olson is now the National Arboretum Director. And what I really liked about this tree was what is the result of an intergeneric hybrid. So I mean, the desert willow, which is one of its parent plants, does really well in the southwest United States. It's used to, you know, like dry desert climates, lots of heat, not a lot of rain, and the Catalpa is more native towards this side of the country, the southeast and stuff, and so together it allows this tree to have a huge range of habitable zones, and it's a really great tree. You can put it like on the edge of a sidewalk that just gets blasted by sun all day. As you can see, it gets full sun, and you know, it can be really dry and it'll do fine. And then when winter comes and it drops below 0 degrees, this will still be able to handle that climate. So I thought that was really interesting, and Tim showed me this tree right before I took a trip to New Mexico this summer, and so I saw its parent plant all throughout New Mexico, and it was a beautiful plant out there, and it was just really cool to see that, you know, all the way across on the other side at the Rockies, we've got something growing that we've been able to bring here on our side of the land. This is usually used as a specimen tree because of how beautiful it gets when it blooms. And actually, what you see, so this tree looks like it's been through some stuff recently, and that's because there was Catalpa sphinx caterpillars that fed on this, I believe 2 weeks ago or last week. And so within that week, I mean, it was like fully there. It had a full canopy, and they just destroyed it in a week. And now, as you can see, it's growing back like nothing ever bothered it. So I think that's a really cool thing about this tree. And because, I mean, it's a great pollinator. It's visited by butterflies, hummingbirds, bees, all the good kind of insects you want in your yard. And it creates, or like the blooms are these tubular, big lip looking flowers. I actually have a picture of the blooms for you guys to pass around. And it's in the Bignoniaceae family. So that's like the trumpet crossvine. That's the same family that's in. And the Latin on that, the chill means big lips. Opsis means resembling, so resembling big lips in reference to the flowers. And Tashkentensis, ensis means to be from, and Tashkent is the capital of Uzbekistan. So it's got that history to it. I'm not sure why that's on the or on the name, but I don't know, Mark.
I was going to ask, where did you hear that it was Tom Ranney and Richard Olson?
I talked to Tim about it, and I read that on a website. I thought it was related. It was like on an NCSU website, not the JCRA website, but like NCSU Hort.
I won't say for sure
page.
That's not right. It's got Tashkentensis in the name because the cross, the Catalpa Shalapsis cross, was made in Uzbekistan.
Okay.
So that's why it's got that name. Morning Cloud and Pink Dawn, kind of the original two cultivars, were named in California. I mean, I suppose it is possible they got the material from Richard and Tom, but and I could be wrong, but I always thought they came either from either UC San Luis Obispo or Rancho Santa Ana out in California.
Okay.
But like I said, I might be wrong. The material may have come from, because Richard Olson definitely did work with Catalpa. I mean, that's where he did a lot of his graduate work, was Catalpa breeding. So
okay, I could be wrong as well, but yeah, I think this is a beautiful specimen tree, and the blooms are quite stunning. So, any questions? Sorry? I can't confidently answer that.
New wood. You can cut it back hard and keep it as a shrub, and it'll flower, or just flower a little bit later in the season.
Okay, we all here, we are ready. This is Picea pungens hoopsii, also known as the Colorado blue spruce. It's really pretty. The genus name is derived from the Latin word pix, meaning pitch, which is in reference to a sticky resin that is found in the spruce. It goes well in zones 2 through 7. It is, I actually don't know how tall this is. They get about 30 to 60 feet tall in the zones 2 through 7, but where they're native in the Rockies, they can get up to 100 feet tall. The only downside that I could really find to this plant was that it is really susceptible to a fungal disease called needle cast. I don't know too much about that, but it made the needles turn brown and look dead. I really like it. I chose it because it's such a pretty blue color, and especially against this weeping castor, it really stands out, and the textures look really well together. And yeah, I just thought it was really pretty, and thought you guys like to see it. So, do we have any questions? I think we're at the bottom of zone 7. I'm sorry?
Sun will come over. We have a lot of afternoons on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So something with conifers, they do tend to like cooler areas than this. Picea pungens will grow here. What I found with a lot of especially the firs and spruces like this, what they always say that kills them are the high nighttime temperatures. That's, they do much better. It's okay when it's hot during the day, it cools off at night, because high elevations it gets very hot. What I have noticed is that slower growing forms like this one, dwarf forms, weeping forms, tend to perform better here than the species and the large growing forms. And I think, this is me conjecturing on this, that I can say for sure, they do perform better, those small ones. I think part of the problem with a lot of these spruces is that with our really long growing season, our high temperatures, they grow very, very quickly. And they will grow so much more quickly than they will other places. And I think they outgrow their root systems. I think their root systems are really designed to grow in rocky soils and kind of take advantage of what they have, but not so I don't think they keep up. So I think they get stressed very easily in our climate. But the slower growing ones, they don't outgrow their root systems. This is
you think
Mark's Guesses 101.
How do you think the growers would have problems? They wouldn't grow them, would they?
Well, a grower is growing it in a container in a black pot above ground, and there you get exceptionally high temperatures in the root zone. That makes growing them very, very difficult.
That's what I say. It's hard to find.
Yeah.
Does it turn green the older it gets, or does it?
It'll green up, but I mean the new growth is definitely the bluest. But this Hoopsii will stay pretty blue all season long. Hoopsii is grown for its more compact habit. If you grew this in Massachusetts or Minnesota, this would be a squat little bun at this age, squat little pyramid. It stretches more for us because it grows quicker, but it'll hold that color pretty well, into late summer and even into winter. But the first couple months it's at its best.
All right, you ready? So my next plant is the praying hands hosta right here. I don't know if you can see it. It's also called the plantain lily. And it was discovered by Jerry Williams in Minnesota as a naturally occurring variation. And I guess he decided that the little curls look like praying hands. It's technically variegated, but it's really rare. If you see the edges of the leaves, they have a little bit of a yellow border on them, but that's it. Like all hostas, it's toxic to cats, dogs, and horses, so that's the only downside I could come up with, but we still have it at my house. We just keep the animals away from it. It is best to be planted in late spring through summer, so now, and you can divide it in early spring or fall, and yeah, there you go. Do you have any questions about the praying hands hosta?
I've got one that doesn't like a container though. I think it wants to be in the ground.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Did you say how big it gets?
About like this, maybe just a few inches either way, and I mean you can divide it really easily.
Did you say that the hosta are toxic to dogs and cats?
And horses.
And horses. And this is something you've found online somewhere?
Oh yeah, and I work in an animal hospital. We get
hosta? Interesting, I've never heard that before.
But is that the only hosta?
Too bad it's not voles.
I think
will the other hosta and come back for more.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of hosta we've had dogs and cats eat, but that is what it is. So I mean we have them in our yard and our dogs don't run to eat them, so I guess they're fine as long as you're watching your pets.
So you plant some and get the deer to come and eat that, and then it won't come back anymore and eat your other hosta. Gotta have a plan.
Okay, my next plant is the Erythema consanguineum, which is this one right here. It is also called a silver-centered jack-in-the-pulpit or a giant Himalayan cobra lily. It is the most common Asian jack-in-the-pulpit, and right here is the inflorescence. It has two main parts. This right here is the spathe, the hood part that also surrounds the spadix, which is the stalk on the inside. And I didn't know what I was getting into when I chose this plant, but apparently it has really complicated reproductive organs. Some of the plants are male, some are female, and some switch. They typically switch. They start out as male when they're young, and then when they gather up enough energy to reproduce, then they switch to female, and then if they use a lot of energy, then they'll switch back to male for a while. And I believe on the inside, underneath the spadix right there, are the female reproductive parts. So I guess this one right now is a female. And this one, you can't really see it on this one, but they do have these drip tips, so water will drip off to prevent rotting. And this one back here, I'm gonna go over this way. This one was finished like last week, but you can see all the way down here, that's what the drip tip looked like. So yeah, I just thought that's pretty interesting. And do we have any questions about that one or that one?
I'll make a comment. These are terribly confused in the trade because people who collect them in the wild call almost any peltate leaf one like this with narrower leaflets, they call it consanguineum. That's iffy at best. That one probably is irrubescens and not consanguineum. And this looks something different than both of those typical, but it's hard to say what it is. That's if those have names on them, they're probably names that I put on them when I was collecting. So I'm lumping me in with that, with the people putting wrong names on them. So just it's one of those things. The more you get to know plants, the more you realize that you're wrong about everything.
Yeah, in my research, there were a ton, and they all seemed to vary just slightly by the leaf shape or the inflorescence, the way it looked or something. So.
Yeah, it may be best as one consanguineum or whatever name comes first as a big genera of a very variable plant. But you have Erycema enthusiasts who do a lot of collecting, and so they put names on every single one of them.
Is this a normal flowering season for that? Seems awfully late for.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. They kind of vary. If whatever consanguineum in cultivation, yeah, they go from relatively early to pretty late. But, yeah, I mean, this one was covered up. It may have come out a little bit later because it was covered by a plant that was moved.
On a related species, has everyone seen the announcement for Tony's big Amorphophallus flowering this week? Okay, just checking.
Yeah, if you haven't, Plant Delights Nursery has Amorphophallus titanum that's coming into flower, and it's looking to be one of the biggest, certainly in the top 100 biggest Amorphophallus that have flowered, that have been recorded as flowering anywhere. And it is worth a visit if you've never seen this in flower. It's the largest unbranched inflorescence. The flowers are 6 to 7 feet tall. It's a jack in the pulpit flower like that. The jack inside the pulpit is 6 to 7 feet tall. The pulpit, which will be burgundy, can be 6 to 8 to 10 feet wide. They're massive, and it's unbelievable that they're actual plants that do that. Go to Sumatra and see it in the wild.
All right, we all here. This is my final plant. This is the Juniperus rigida, the temple juniper. I don't know why it's looking a little sad. I promised 2 weeks ago when I picked it, it looked better. But I wanted to mention, I don't know if you'll actually have it on here. Oh, no. Okay, well, if you look up the accession number for this plant, like Libby mentioned earlier, it'll have the 2 X's at the beginning, meaning that this plant is really old and it has been here for a while. So, like she mentioned, a little mysterious, don't really know everything about it. Thought that was cool. It says it has a max height of 20 feet when I looked it up online. I don't know what 20 feet looks like, but it looks like it might be a little bit more than that. So, there's that. A little bit about the Latin name. The rigida means rigid or firm, if you can believe it, in reference to the foliage. It's often grown as an ornamental tree or as a bonsai. I haven't seen a bonsai of this, but I bet it would look cute. It is dioecious, which means that the plant either has male or female reproductive parts. Unlike the Erycema back there, it won't switch back and forth or have to at one time. And it got its name because it's common in Japanese temples, so that's why it is a temple juniper. And again, it's not the prettiest, but 2 weeks ago I thought it looked pretty interesting, so I learned about it today. Do we have any questions? Oh, Adam, you know a little bit about cloud pruning, do you? Is this something that could be cloud pruned? Sorry, I put you on the spot, but I know you were talking about cloud pruning.
Yeah, usually cloud pruning is done on like Japanese maples.
Okay, so
I think it's usually with stuff. I would say probably not because of like the habit of the tail looking habit of its branches. Because usually it's done on like Japanese maples and Chamaecyparis and stuff like that, where like you can create like layers above and below each other that don't like cross over each other.
Because this kind of like drops down into another layer, so okay.
One of the primary tenets of cloud pruning, the basic thing is you never let any branch go down.
Okay.
Everything is above the branch, and so you wouldn't have anything if you did that with this.
All right. So, do we have any questions about this here?
I will say it's looking pretty sad because this is one of the driest spots in the arboretum right here under this tree. It's bone dry back here, and then it's shaded. It's a juniper. It likes a little more sun. And,
Get that like this
competition.
Yeah.
So this is Rhamnia culturae. It's in the poppy family, but doesn't share the same genus as the more commonly known opium or the California poppies. It's native to the southern parts of California and northwestern Mexico, where I've never seen it, but supposedly it can get to 7 feet in height, which gives it one of its common names, the California tree poppy. And I'll start over here. We missed the peak flowering, but that's what it would look like. And you can see from the image the flowers have 6 papery white petals and numerous yellow stamens in the center, which give it its other common name, the fried egg poppy. But I think when the wind is blowing right, it sort of can look like a birdie in badminton. And I think that just for its flowers, it's a notable plant. And in ideal environments, it can get quite weedy. So I guess in California, not so much here, but where it's dry and good drainage. And I don't know about you, but if all of my weeds flowered like that, I would not be opposed to it. And Doug was telling me the other day that J.C. Ralston didn't think that this plant would grow well here, and I think maybe it was Tony Avent who encouraged it to be grown. It certainly doesn't flower as profusely as it would in Southern California, but hopefully maybe next spring, if you're here, you'll get to see it. And I think that concludes our tour. So if you have any questions, thank you.